Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, mori miliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so honored and so grateful that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. One of our favorite guests is returning to the show. Rajani LaRocca is joining us to celebrate her brand new picture book. It debuts today. It's called I'll Go and Come Back. Before we invite Rajani to join us in the studio, we want to invite you to join us and connect with us on social media. So many places to do it. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. At Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Check out our Reading With Your Kids page on Pinterest. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, it's at Jedley Magic. And coming soon, we're going to be on TikTok. And we absolutely want you to join us at readingwithyourkids.com. We are revamping and relaunching our free newsletter, and it's going to be available to you in April. So you want to go to Reading With Your Kids and sign up for that free newsletter today. We love connecting with our friends, and also please feel free at readingwithyourkids.com to use that contact button at the top of the page to let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we could be doing better, and also let us know who you'd like to have on the show. And let us know what we should do on TikTok. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Massachusetts. She's right down the highway from us here in our Reedville studios. She's returning to the show to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called I'll Go and Come Back. Please welcome back to the show, Rajani LaRocca. Hey, Rajani, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. How are you?
Cold, but, otherwise blessed and really excited to have you back on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And I'm really excited about this picture book.
Yeah, so tell us all about I'll Go and Come Back, please.
So I'll Go and Come Back is about a little girl named Jyoti who goes to India to visit her relatives there. And she feels a little lost and homesick. And her cousins kind of go to school all day, so she's really kind of alone. And her grandmother, whose name is Sita, and Pati, which means grandmother in Tamil, she helps her out by playing with her and reading with her and cooking with her. And so Jyoti feels better. And then later, the grandmother comes to visit Jyoti in the United States, and she feels lonely and homesick, and Jyoti helps the grandmother out. And the title of the book, I'll Go and Come Back, is kind of comes from this Tamil phrase, meaning the same thing, because in Tamil, we don't say goodbye. We say, I'll go and come back, so that there is always the promise of return. And I love this book. It's like really close to my heart. The grandmother character is very much based on my own grandmother. And the feelings in the story about feeling lonely in a place, even though you're surrounded by love, is also kind of based on my own experience from when I traveled to India. And it is also the first book we ever sold way back in March of 2018. And here it is coming out 4 years later.
Well, there's so much to unravel there. I mean, the first thing, we do have a lot of authors who listen to the show. Their jaw might have kind of hit the floor to think 4 years from the time you sold it until it gets published. That's kind of mind-boggling for a lot of folks. But that's a little bit longer than we hear. We hear that most books take at least 2.5 to 3 years to come to life. So if you're thinking about getting into the publishing game, the children's book writing game, be prepared for some long waits.
Yes, absolutely. And part of it has to do with when the publisher and I decided on Sarah Palacios to be the illustrator, and she's wonderful. She does such incredible work, but her schedule was very full. And so part of it was that, we wanted her to be the one to illustrate this book, but we needed to wait for her to be free, which was totally worth it. So sometimes that's part of what happens with the schedule. And all in all, it's probably for the best, given what has been going on in the world in general over the past 2 years, that it wasn't, rushed through, because it's fine. Nowadays, now at least things are a little bit better in terms of our worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, and thankfully, fingers crossed, the books are not sitting in a container ship somewhere in the middle of the ocean, like a lot of books are right now.
Exactly. I got one copy, so I think we're okay. I think we're going to be okay.
I first off, I love that in Tamil, you don't say goodbye. Like a lot of languages, like Hebrew shalom and Hawaiian aloha. And even countries like Italy where they say ciao, it's just that hey, and it's a greeting, and it's not goodbye, it's not the end. It's just like, yeah, we're going to catch you later.
Yes. What's really interesting is that since the title has been out there and the cover has been out there, I've had so many people from other cultures also tell me that there is a phrase like that in their culture that they use instead of goodbye. And I just love that. I love the idea that when we're taking leave of somebody we love, that we basically say, I'm coming back. Right. I'll see you again. That just makes me happy. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. And thankfully in English, there are ways that we can do that. We don't have to say goodbye. We can say see you later, until next time. Yes. If you're a wise teenager, you can say smell you later. It's
absolutely. There's many ways. So long. Exactly.
So long. I also love this story. The idea that we are living in this world where families can be continents apart, and one of my international daughters is living in Australia these days, on the complete opposite side of the world, but we're still able to maintain. Thankfully, we're still able to maintain contact. But that. It's interesting when we travel from a place like the United States with all these different cultures, and we go back to visit our family and our ancestral homes. Sometimes we can feel really out of place, even though we're surrounded by people who love us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was a child and we would go back to India, especially when I was younger, when I got older and things in India changed, but also I changed. It didn't feel like so much culture shock. But when I first went back there and I was a little kid, it was hard at times. And I just felt like everything was so different. Like the TV was so different. Like the houses were different. Like the bathrooms were different. Like everything was different. And it was hard. And while my cousins were around, I didn't really feel like it bothered me too much because they were kids like me and we were all kind of hanging out together. But, they had school when I was there over summer break. And so they would be gone during the day and I would be like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then the adults in my family would just like come and hang out with me. And of course, my parents were always there, but it was really fun, to, interact with the adults in my family and like help with the cooking, certainly help with the eating. There was a lot of helping with the eating in my day and just really feel like this was a home for me as well. And I always felt so welcome. But, those first few days were always a little bit awkward. And then similarly, my grandmother did come to visit us in the U.S. when I think I was 13 years old. So I was a little older than the little girl in the story, but she found it to be incredible culture shock as well. And, we lived in a suburban part of Louisville, Kentucky, and our streets were really quiet. It was so different from the noisy, city streets that she was used to in Bangalore, India. And she literally, there's a phrase that is in the book that my grandmother actually said to my mom. She said, "I can't hear a sparrow chirp from inside the house." And it's because, like it was hot and the air conditioning was on. So like that was kind of drowning out whatever, outside noise there was. And there wasn't much outside noise because it was a quiet suburban neighborhood. And, I just will never forget, her saying that. And I was thinking, wow, this is culture shock for her too, even though she's with us, and so it was a very interesting, memory to go back to.
Yeah. That's what an interesting phrase. And it immediately made me think of why I love traveling to Puerto Rico or to Panama or Costa Rica. It's because even when you're inside, you're kind of outside because the windows are open, and inside just means that there's a roof over your head in a lot of cases. And so you really feel part of nature. And I love that. So I can definitely relate to what your grandmother was saying.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'm not an artist, really, but the story idea came to me as like a visual image. And so I was at a conference with some friends of mine, a children's literature conference, and we were in line getting lunch. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have an idea. And so I like took out my notebook. I sketched this little graphic, and basically it was of a sari. And like, so saris have borders that are usually contrasting colors from the main body of the sari. And sometimes there's a color from the main body that is reflected in the border, and a pattern sometimes. And there's often a color or a pattern from the border that is reflected in the sari. So I thought of this like basically this mirror image, like graphic. And I was like, this is it. This is a mirror image story about this little girl who feels all these things that are kind of strange and making her feel lonely and homesick about being in India. And then similarly, there's the grandmother who feels strange and lonely and homesick about being in the US. And there are all these parallels between their two experiences. So that is how it came to me. And I was like, that's it. And then I just took notes, and then that turned into picture book text.
That's really cool. What a great creation story. I love that. And there are definitely parallels. And I think there are so many conversations that families can have as they're reading I'll Go and Come Back, hopefully again and again and again. The idea of the fact that all of us have families somewhere else, that are in a different culture. Even if you're just talking about here within the States, if you're talking about a family that has one part of the family lives in Boston, the other part of the family lives in Louisville. I've been to both places, and that's a very different culture in both places. And a kid traveling from Boston down to Louisville for the summer can feel very out of place on occasions.
Yes. Even New York is a little bit different from Boston, I would say.
Yes.
Even though they're both in the Northeast.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Especially if you live in the suburban part of Boston and you go to the downtown New York, it's like, wait.
Yes.
But I also love the idea. I think as families are reading this book, I think one of the things that would be fun would be to just talk to each other about what do you think it would be like for us to visit India? What do you think it would be like for us to visit where our our maternal grandmother came from, where our paternal grandfather came from? The differences, what do you think? What do you think if our grandfather from Puerto Rico visited our grandmother in Ireland? What would that be like? So many different conversations that can come from this.
Yes. And I also love the idea of thinking about if somebody is lonely or homesick, whether they're your relative or not, what are some things you can do to help them feel better? And part of it is, I think, just sharing things with them. And for me, I mean, if you've read any of my books, you know that like food plays a big part in almost all of them. So for me, I loved the food aspect of this book too. There's a lot of food sharing, food making, and food, sharing together. And that always makes me happy. And I feel like when people experience some kind of culture shock, if you can share food with them, and find something that you both enjoy, or find something that reminds them of something that is, more familiar to them. That's also a wonderful way to help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about the story is the intergenerational friendship between the grandmother and the grandchild. I don't think we celebrate that enough here in the States. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons is it's sometimes those intergenerational friendships are hard because, here I am, I'm almost 100 years old. It's really hard for me and my niece to find things that we can do together, even though I try to skate with her and keep up with her. It's physically, we can't, but we can definitely sit down and eat together. We can definitely spend the day cooking together and teaching each other, how to make our favorite meals.
Yes. And the other thing you can do is share stories together.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I love about picture books is that, of course they're for young children, but they're for young children to read or be read to by adults, right? And so, I write novels and picture books, but I have to tell you that for the older generation of my family, like my parents and my in-laws, they love the picture books because they're bite-sized. And so, I know I'm guaranteed that those books will be read by the older generation. And I also love that, someday when, they read those kinds of books to my children, but then someday when my kids have children, there's another generation that is going to share with the older generation. And so because there are words and pictures, everyone can enjoy it. So I just love that part of the book too, is that it's a story about grandparents, and grandchildren that can be enjoyed by grandparents and grandchildren.
Yeah. You bring up something else when you're talking about, intergenerational friendships, especially friendships between relatives that live in different countries. There are a lot of kids who have grandparents who live in a different country, and they're not able to speak the language.
Yes.
And I think obviously you don't need to speak a language to enjoy a great meatball or a curry, but you also don't have to speak the same language to enjoy a picture book. Just
right.
To take a picture, walk through a book with somebody and just kind of point and smile, and that can be a really, really fun experience.
Yes, and that's actually one of the kind of points in this book is that Jyoti doesn't speak much Tamil and Sitapati doesn't speak much English, but they manage to communicate anyway. So they kind of use whatever words they know. They fill in words that they don't know with their own language. They do some charades, and then they kind of point at things in the world, and they point at things in books, and then they eat together. So, sometimes language barriers really aren't that much of a barrier, and, we can get past them, especially, I think, between older people and children, because young children don't really, it doesn't matter to them necessarily that they don't know the language, that they find some way to express themselves anyway. And older people have the perspective that they just want to communicate something to them, and it's all done in the spirit of love. So it works. I just love that too. And I love that illustrations and pictures don't need words to go with them necessarily.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that while reading this book with their kids, adults will encourage their kids to not be afraid. I think that's one of the biggest hang-ups with language. It's I can't do anything with that person because I don't know their language. They don't know my language. I don't want to say something. I don't want to look stupid. I've spent a big part of my life looking stupid. It's okay. It's, you take a chance. I've trying to communicate in Spanish. I have taken very innocent words that I thought what I was saying, very innocent words, and I mispronounced them, and oh boy, had a completely different meaning, but it ends up being a great story and something that actually helps the bonding.
Yes, and ultimately no one will get angry at you for trying to speak their language with respect. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Even if your pronunciation is horrible and you don't know all the right words, they appreciate your trying. Yeah. And I think that we know that as little kids, we're just trying. And then we kind of forget that as once we get a little bit older, and we've just got to like lose it. We've just got to just say, don't worry about being embarrassed. Just try. And it's okay, Yeah. And people will understand, and they will try and help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime I travel to a country where a different language is spoken, I always try to learn hello. I'm sorry, I don't speak your language. Could you help me in English? Because it's so... I've seen this when I go, and it was really clear to me visiting Quebec in Canada, where, French is the official language. And if I go up and say bonjour, and I'm sorry, I don't speak English, can you help me? Boom, right away, they are there in fluent English, and they'll be able to give me a hand. I've seen people go up to the same person and just expect them to speak English. And suddenly this person is like, I only speak French. I'm sorry. I can't help you. Go away.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, yes. So I think those are very useful phrases to know. And it's just like, at least you've tried that. And then people are like, oh, okay, so I understand that you can't speak this language, but you're trying. Mm-hmm. And it's all right.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's really fun when, like, my grandmother knew, a bunch of different Indian languages, and she just didn't know English that well. And so the best kind of conversations I used to have with her were ones where I would try and speak some Tamil to her. And if she didn't, and then, I would get to a place where I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say. And I would try and say it in English. And then she would answer me in Kannada or Hindi or some other language, which just made me laugh. And I was like, I don't know any Hindi. So like, don't do that, Grandma. Like, it's okay. So it was really fun. And we definitely got along, and we understood each other no matter what.
That's really beautiful. And for those of you who don't know, India is a fascinating country where I believe there's 28 official languages in India, but probably a couple of hundred languages and dialects that are spoken around. And I know, we here in the United States, we tend to just say, oh, India, this one thing. And it's not. India is actually a very diverse rainbow of cultures and languages and people.
Yes, absolutely. And, ironically, a lot of times English is the easiest language to kind of be understood in, because a lot of people end up taking English there because, the British were there for a very long time. So, the rest of my family, everyone spoke English. Like there was never an issue. But with my grandmother, she was the only one that I had some challenges communicating with her. But it was great. It was really great.
I wonder if the fact that you had these challenges speaking with your grandmother, communicating with, actually helped you guys grow closer.
Oh, absolutely. Because you realize that words are not the only things that matter.
Yeah.
That there are ways to show love in so many, there's so many other ways to show love. Yeah. And that the words that matter, you will find the way to say them. Yeah. So yeah, she was just a lovely person. And, the other thing I will say is that in India, like traditionally, the traditional family meant that there were multiple generations all living together. So my grandmother lived with my aunt and uncle and my cousins. And so when we would go visit and stay with them, all of us would be together. And, growing up in the U.S., my parents and I, we didn't have any relatives, like any close relatives here when I was growing up. I missed out on that. And that was like, I realized only later that was like something that was really missing. And I've been really fortunate in that, when my kids were little, my parents moved in with us. And so we had a multi-generational family in our house. So that was like something really wonderful. And I can't overestimate how lovely it is to have an older generation living the same house as your young kids. They just were always there. Like they got to see them every day. And it was, from when they were babies. And so that is a treasure. I feel so fortunate that we were able to do that. and that my parents got to witness the kids growing up. They're now young adults. And that my children just got to benefit from having this older generation and their wisdom and their sense of play. Grandparents have a whole different, view on things, right? They're not in charge of raising you. They just get to have fun with you and spoil you, which is so lovely. So, no matter how many rules I had to set, my parents didn't have to impose any rules on them. They were just, they were free to do whatever they wanted to do with them, which I think is just a lovely aspect of that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things I wanted to just jump back to, that statement that you made, that there are so many different ways that we can show each other love. And I think that would be a great ongoing conversation that we can have with our kids. How can we show love without using our words? Yeah. Rajani, tell everybody, please, where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about I'll Go and Come Back.
Yeah, the best place is my website, www.rajanilarocca.com. So it's RAJANILAROCCA.com. And I have information about all my books there and, buy links for I'll Go and Come Back and the story behind the story for just about everything.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of I'll Go and Come Back, Rajani LaRocca. Hey, Rajani, I'll go and come back.
Me too, Jed. Me too.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Christina Dankert is going to be here. She'll be celebrating the Kindness Machine. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, please do be sure to go to readingwithyourkids.com. If you are an author, you can find out how you can celebrate your book here on the podcast. Submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel and also find out how you can take part in our monthly promotion programs. If you're a parent, caregiver, educator, you can check out our Certified Great Read Wall of Fame and also check out our blog. That's all there at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Chris, want to start by thanking our guest, Rajani LaRocca. Please be sure to check out I'll Go and Come Back. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.